Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. Normally, I would say that I am the game master, but not for this one. The guy who ran the Giganta game was James Porch. James is an interesting guy. He actually used to work at the zoo and he worked with the gorillas, which I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit here because obviously there's gorillas in this game. So let's rewind a little bit. Um, when I was a little kid in the 70s watching Super Friends, I had a crush on Giganta. I, for whatever reason, when other little boys, when I was a kid, they would think, oh, girls have cooties, girls are the worst, blah, blah, blah. I was never like that, ever. Um, I was always kind of girl crazy as a kid. And at any rate, so fast forward to Justice League Unlimited. When that cartoon was on TV, um, they brought back Giganta, and I really liked her. And at the time, the our group of gamers, which included James, we were getting together and we would play, but also we would watch shows and stuff together. And so whatever episode of Justice League came out that week, we would watch the episode and it would kind of get us fired up about gaming. And then afterwards, maybe we'd order a pizza or something, and people who had to make a character sheet or whatever would do that while we were eating the pizza. And you'd drink a couple cold beers or something, and then we would play DC Heroes, right? And so that was kind of what was going on in our gaming group when Justice League ended. And I remember watching the final episode and being kind of sad. And there was a bunch of reasons why I was sad, but one of them I remember voicing at the time was I felt like I didn't really get as much Giganta as I had hoped for. And especially there at the end of the show, if you're familiar with JOU, um, a bunch of the villains kind of help save the world. And the villains then afterwards kind of say something along the lines of like, now what? And there were other little moments Giganta had in that series that made me think that they were leaning towards a redemption story arc. And I really wanted to see a heroic Giganta. I thought that would be really cool. So at any rate, I'm sort of talking about all of this stuff with James. And I said, one of the things I was saying is it would be nice to play for a change because I always am running the game. I don't get to play as often as I would like. Um, I really like Giganta. I would like to see a series of games, not just one game that would give her the spotlight. And I really think she could be a hero. And I think she's a very sympathetic character, stuff like that. And he was like, "Well, I'll run that." And I was like, "Dude, I would be all about that." And and so then James went home and he started working on the game and he would drop me little emails here and there. And I think the thing about James, and I think he himself has said this, and also I think he listens to the podcast. So shout out to James if he's listening. Um, I believe he has said because he has ran um in the city he lives in, which he lives about 2 hours south of me. Um, in the city where he lives now, I believe he's running DC Heroes for his friends. And something that he said once was something along the lines of like, he goes off on these tangents that if everybody wants to play like let's say an X-Men game or something like that, where they have a specific thing in mind they're wanting to do, and that's what all of his friends are on board for, that James said he has a bad habit of, like, he likes quirky, weird stuff that's a little off the beaten path. Like biker mice from Mars is like one of his favorite things ever. And so he will kind of hijack a campaign and try to slowly turn it into whatever it is he's into. You know what I mean? And so I don't think, because I mean, I don't know, when did JLU end? Like 2008, maybe? Whatever year it was, though, we hadn't really noticed that yet because James hadn't ran many games yet back then, right? So he's like, "Yeah, we'll do this thing, and it's gonna be all about Giganta. She gets the spotlight, so on and so forth." And then he sent me an email, and he was like, "Well, I have this idea for Gorilla Grodd because part of Giganta's backstory is her and Grodd. The deal with those two varies from continuity to continuity. In some of them, she starts as a gorilla, and then Grodd does something to her that makes her human, which is kind of weird because usually that's the opposite of what Grodd wants. There's a million times in continuity when Grodd will make some kind of like a ray gun that actually turns humans into gorillas. So, at any rate, though, we had not gone that route in our game. We used the Super Friends origin story where she's not really connected to Grodd. She's connected to Apache Chief, and his powers come from this dust. And so she got a pouch of the dust and poured it on herself, and that's it. That's her origin story. So James wanted to bring Grodd into it. And instead of saying she started as a gorilla, the threat was then going to be he's going to threaten to turn her into a gorilla. And I was going to play the character that I always play, and he is going to have to rescue her and keep this from happening. And I'm like, well, that sounds fine. And I'm thinking this is just the first episode or whatever. Like, that's fine. And so, but the longer James worked on it, the more it became about the gorillas. And the more and more he kind of phased Giganta out of the story. You know what I mean? And so when it finally comes time to play, and I mentioned this in an earlier video, so we'll not spend a super long amount of time on this. But the gist is then that so as I've mentioned in lots of my videos, the character I like to play is Superman Red. He's the very first RPG character I ever made up. And he has a bunch of duplicates, right? And each one is kind of doing his own thing, living his own life. By the way, I should probably do a video just about this, but another friend of mine who lives in the same town as James, his name is Eric Grosscup. I think he also listens to the podcast. So shout out to Eric if he's listening. Eric owns this book called The Gamer's Bible, and in it, it has character classes for gamers, not the characters that you play, but the guys sitting around the gaming table eating the pizza and rolling the dice. It has character classes for us. And I found myself in there, and I am what the book refers to as a Xerox. And so what that means is, yes, I've played a bunch of games in the past. Yes, I've played a bunch of different kinds of characters in the past. But at the end of the day, I found a thing that I'm comfortable doing, and I just do the one thing over and over and over and over again. And so that's why there are so many Superman Reds. And the fact there's duplicates means if one of them dies, it's kind of not a big deal. I can just play a different one then later. And you know what I mean? That's kind of the reason for that. That's why there's so many Superman Reds. So at the beginning of this story, the idea is that one of them wants to date Giganta, and that she was on Paradise Island where the Amazons tried to reform her. Now she's living somewhere in America in a nice little kind of 1950s suburb, and currently she's not being a villain at all. She's just trying to get her life together, you know? And I thought that was really cool. I was like very gung ho about that concept. And so it's a Friday night, and my character shows up with some flowers and stuff, and he's going to take her out to eat, so on and so forth. And when he gets to the house, there's signs of a struggle. So he has a look around, and long story short, he finds hairs from gorillas. And it turns out that gorillas from Gorilla City were sent to abduct her. And so he goes to Gorilla City to try to rescue the girl. And when he gets there, he meets with the leader of the supposedly good gorillas, who was named, I think, Salavar. And we'll just call him the good gorilla king, right? So he meets with him, and it was very weird that James chose this, but James decided that the gorillas think that they are more evolved than humans, which I've seen that kind of joke before in other cartoons and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay. But he took it to the level where they were like supremacists, where they were being like super racist. It was really weird. And it's particularly weird because James is, in my opinion, like very left wing, and he's not a racist person. You know what I mean? Um, at any rate, I don't know why he made that choice. But so like every time these NPC gorillas are talking to my character, they're being very condescending and like snarky and just talking down to my guy. And the way I play my guy is, and don't be confused, he's not like Homelander or Omni-Man or something like that, where he's like outright evil with the powers of Superman, right? I play him more like, yeah, he has the whole Superman thing going on in terms of his power set, but in terms of his personality, um, he's trying to be a good guy. He's just a flawed character, but he has a temper. And so the whole time these guys are saying like, what a piece of crap they think I am and stuff like that. I just keep thinking like, do these monkeys know I could throw them into the sun? Because like, I swear to God, I will if this keeps up. And and like it was just it was really weird, and it was kind of like sucking all the fun out of it. But so through them, you find out where Gorilla Grodd is, and he's building this tower. And so you go to this section of jungle or whatever, and sure enough, there's this tower, and it's built out of red girders that are welded or riveted together or whatever. And so my guy starts to make his way up, and at the top of the thing is where Grodd has this ray gun that he's building that you can already guess. The ray gun is going to turn all the humans in the world into gorillas. And then he also has some mind control stuff going on where he's going to be like the king of all the gorillas or whatever. And he's got Giganta here like tied up to a chair, and she's going to be his queen. And I think that the justification for why he chose her was because we said, like, how do I want to put this? It's not that she's fat. She's not fat, but she's just big. You know what I mean? Like, um, even when she's like 6 feet tall, she's just a big girl. Like, maybe compared to like Big Barda or, oh shoot, what's the name of the one chick? Not Ronda Rousey, but I guess that would work too. Gina Carano or whatever from The Mandalorian. You know what I mean? Like they're just bigger kind of girls. So I guess his idea was sort of, once she's a gorilla, she's going to produce. um, powerful baby gorillas for him, or something like that. Like the idea more or less is that she's like an alpha female, I guess. That's how you'd look at it. So at any rate, Grodd's mad that I'm there, and there's all these chemicals that makes this stuff work. So whatever it is he's going to do to Giganta, which he has not done yet, um, the chemicals are going to turn her into an ape. And so when my character shows up, he reacts by throwing these things at my guy. And it's like, a 50-gallon drum of, whatever. I'm trying to think of a chemical, but you get the gist. And so he starts throwing these things, and they're full of liquid, so they're heavy. But it kind of doesn't matter because I'm a Superman. And so I break all this stuff, and there was a lot of smack talk. Um, and I beat up Grodd and I saved the girl. And it occurs to me at the very end that I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. There's red girders everywhere. There's like a girl in a pink dress. There's a gorilla throwing barrels at me. I'm like, James, was this a Donkey Kong joke? And he starts just sort of giggling. And I was like, was this whole thing just about Donkey Kong? Because I can't remember. I know for sure we said it in 1958. I can't remember now if that's when the movie Attack of the 50-Foot Woman came out, or I can't remember why we used 58. Because that was another sticking point that bothered me. It was Gorilla Grodd's first appearance was 1959. And I was like, well, why isn't it set in 59 then? But at any rate, um, I was like, so if this is like a Donkey Kong thing, it's kind of weird because Donkey Kong was like an 80s thing and we're in the 50s, and you know what I mean? And yeah, that's what it was. Just the whole thing was a Donkey Kong joke. And Giganta had such a small part in the adventure. Like really all it was, instead of this redemption story arc that is what I wanted to see, it was really just you didn't see her until the end. She had no speaking parts. She was tied to a chair. You know what I mean? And after I saved her, James, there was no like uh I can't remember what it's called. Not falling action. I don't think that's the right term. But there's like the climax of the story, and then it's after that as things are sort of slowly settling down. Like for instance, in Back to the Future, you get the scene at the end where Doc drives Marty home, right? And then Marty sees his family the next morning and stuff. There's stuff like that. We didn't do any of that. There was nothing like, okay, so I take Giganta out on our date and talk to her, and it's like, nope, game is over. That's it. So I was really bothered by that. And to this day, we've never gone back yet and revisited that to give Giganta her turn in the spotlight and give her a chance to try to be a good person, and you know what I mean? So that really bothers me. And I've sort of left a little hole in my game world in a way for those adventures to be plugged into, because we don't see Giganta again until the Super Friends era in the 70s. And this is 1958, right? So when we see her then, which by the way, she doesn't get old, because when they took her to Paradise Island, if you go back and watch those videos I made about Paradise Island, it's surrounded by the sort of like mystical fog or mists or whatever you want to call it. And when you pass through that, it gives you unaging. So Giganta will never grow old. You know what I mean? She'll always be eternally young. But at any rate, so yeah, when we see her 20 years after this, basically, I did in those adventures specifically say that the reason she was helping the Legion of Doom was because Grodd was using mind control on her. So when we see Giganta later, um, she's not choosing to be bad. You know what I mean? So that redemption story arc may have happened, and then Grodd just gets to her after that. So we really, if, as I'm making these videos, I'm kind of making a list in my head of stuff of, oh yeah, we should revisit those ideas. And I got a question, or yeah, I got a question recently about my Flash video. And somebody asked me basically how I could be running games for 40 years and there's these certain things that I've never done before. Um, until relatively recently, right? The priority of my game world was reversed from what you're seeing right now in these videos. The way we would run games, like I mentioned earlier in this video, that I would say like we'd watch cartoons together and then we'd like order a pizza and then we would make character sheets and then we would play, right? And so when we were making character sheets, we weren't making character sheets for Giganta or the Flash or Spider-Man or Wolverine or whoever, right? We were making character sheets for original characters of ours, like Powerhouse, Shadowstorm, Torch, stuff like that, that listeners have never heard of. And in the past, when I have made videos about those characters, who the irony is that's like 90% of our game, right? Nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear a story about Powerhouse or Torch or Shadowstorm or you know what I mean? They just haven't they don't get any views. Conversely, if I make a video about Deadpool, it gets 1,000 views in a day. You know what I mean? So so to answer that question, the reason why there are certain things that might seem obvious to you of like, well, why haven't you done that yet with these characters? Um, in very recent years, we've kind of changed the focus to the more famous characters like Superman and Batman and stuff. But for like at least say the first 35 years of gaming, if Superman was in the game, he just made a very brief cameo. To this day, I have never ran a Superman campaign where somebody played Superman and just week after week, it's okay, Clark. So you go to the Daily Planet and you hear on the news that Brainiac is attacking the city. What do you do? That's not what we do. What we do is we have characters like I had a guy for a long time named Powerhouse, and he looked up to Superman. And so he would maybe meet Superman on a rare occasion and kind of fanboy all over him, that kind of thing. But that was it. So that's one of the reasons why we haven't spent as much time giving Giganta the spotlight as I would like. I am a big Giganta fan. No pun intended. Um, but at any rate, that's it for this one. I want to thank you guys for being here. I usually say this at the beginning of the videos, but I don't want to do this one and not mention it. I am keenly aware that there's a million other things you could be doing, and you're listening to me prattle on instead. And that's awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. Also, like I say in all the videos, right? Make sure you like the video because that helps us out. Uh, ring the bell so you're notified when I upload more stuff. Um, you know the routine, right? All that jazz. And I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.